on the screen without any assistance from anybody. I feel like I've graduated to a 9-year-old now in terms of my technology. Beautiful day. Glad you're able to be here this evening. Good to see you all. We're going to have a word of prayer. Chet's going to lead us in prayer before we get started. Chet.
May we all pray together. Our kind and gracious Father in heaven, Father, we come to Thee in this avenue of prayer with thankfulness in our hearts for the day and for the blessing that You have bestowed upon us. And also, Father, we're thankful for this congregation here at 25th Street and for the elders as they oversee this local group and the deacons that work under the oversight of the eldership. For each member here, Father, we have several of our number who are sick. Ask that You put Your healing hand upon them if it be Your will. If not, give them strength to endure till the time's right when they can be healed, Father. Also, Father, we want to make a request that You be with each teacher of the classes. Give them a ready recollection of things they prepared. Father, be with us, the students in the audience, that we listen in view of eternity, willing to make that application to our lives if needed to be better in Your sight, Father. Also, Father, we want to make a request that You be merciful and forgive us. Continue with us. Bless us. These prayers I ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I don't think I got to this final comment from our conversation last Sunday, and I just found it useful to appreciate sort of the impact that artificial intelligence in the machine world has on those of us who can get swept up in those kind of things. I want to stress that, and I think it was mentioned in class too, this may not be something that you delve into or spending time with, but it could be a child or a grandchild or a neighbor's friend or something. Someone you know that gets caught up in this world. And it happens to people that don't necessarily have any predisposition to falling for fantasy or losing touch with reality, but it is the nature of the programming itself that's causing this to happen. This is being done on purpose. It's creating an environment, a false environment, that has an allure or an attraction with a lot of affirmation for whatever it is you want to believe. And you take those thoughts into that realm and you start exploring those things. And it's becoming quite prevalent in the world of those who are dealing with folks dealing with mental health issues, that this is a contributing factor to losing touch with a sense of reality and losing touch with what's important and falling into these schemes of fantasy thinking. Psalms chapter 12 verses 1-2 in the ESV says, "Save, O Lord, for the godly one is gone. The faithful have vanished from among the children of men. Everyone utters lies to his neighbor, and with flattering lips and a double heart they speak." And it's exactly what we explored last Lord's Day. It's with flattering lips. It's to increase engagement and to keep you listening, and with a double heart. These things are not real. It's the first time I've noticed this, to be honest with you, is that I know on my browser now, the first response that I always get to a query is sort of AI goes out and takes a quick look, and then there's links to all these things that it might be, more documented as to where it's getting a source. But it's throwing up now an AI response, and I looked at it and it says, "Artificial intelligence may not be accurate." Is what it says right above the answer it gives. And I don't recall ever seeing that or noticing that in the past. But again, the AI attempts to explain this phenomenon on optimizing engagement. There was a critic of artificial intelligence who said in an interview recently, "What does a human being going insane look like to a corporation?" And his answer was, "A subscriber." And again, we are the product. We are not the consumer of these things. They are mining us for information. So I wanted to end with a couple of those last warnings that this is, it sounds almost, Matrix-like or some of these things that sound like fantasy, science fiction. But science fiction is becoming too relevant these days based upon how this technology is being utilized. I want to look at some self-help things this evening. I have asked many of you, I said, is this resonating with you? Is this doing any good? Are you getting anything out of this? And I'm being told, yes, it's a good class. But I'm trying to think of how do we kind of tie this up and make this relevant to each one of us. And I thought I'd spend a little time on just this idea of self-help. We have focused upon having compassion and having patience and being able to sympathize with those that are going through periods of mental wellness where they don't feel healthy, they don't feel like they're making the best choices, they don't feel like their thinking is on straight. And our first inclination is to want to sympathize and want to reach out and want to make connection and want to support this individual in these feelings. Our first and best inclination is to show love. And however that manifests itself, it's typically in the form of, I don't necessarily understand you. I don't necessarily understand what you're trying to deal with. I don't know that I can help you or help you address your problems or fix you in any way. But I do want you to know that you're not alone in these things and that I support you in what you're going through and that you are important as a person. You're not alone. You're not to be isolated. You're not to be detached. You're not to pull away from people. I want you to stay part of the community. And when we jump to that thought, it follows along, Ephesians 4 and many other verses. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, and forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. We show this tenderness and this compassion and this patience because has been shown to us. And that is how we should react when people are struggling. But this is not how we tend to view our own weaknesses. If I'm anything like you, I can tell you I have always felt as though I am my own worst critic. I've always felt that. I've always been harder on myself. And in areas of life where I would have just absolutely overlooked something or saying, well, that's okay. That's just who you are. Don't be so hard on yourself. For those same things, for those same feelings, or for those same behaviors, I will be hypercritical of myself. And many of us have a tendency to do that. And if we can read Ephesians 4:32 and talk about that our kindness and that our tenderheartedness and our nature to forgive one another flows from the fact that God has forgiven us, then why can't we apply that to ourselves as well? Or why don't we apply that to ourselves as well? So I want to talk about this idea of self-compassion just a little bit and see if this rings true in your life. It is for me a very difficult thing to do when I've had a hard patch. And I feel like I don't have my head on straight. And the day comes and goes, and I stop and think, what did I do today? What actually happened today? And I have one of those times, and I tend to be morose and beat myself up for it and think, well, that's why you can't get anything done. I've been reading a little bit about procrastination. I am a procrastinator. I put things off and do them at the last minute. Sometimes I joke about you. People say, oh, I don't know how you can teach class like that. I say, well, it's easy. I don't do any preparation. I just get up here and spew whatever comes out of my mouth. And some of you kind of, I kind of encourage some of you not to get so worried about teaching class being performative art. We're allowed to say things and make mistakes. But on the other hand, I like to kind of fly by the seat of my pants. I don't necessarily put a ton of thought into the actual words or discussion I'm going to have. If I got some themes I want to try to cover. And I'm comfortable that way, but it's not always successful either. Not being as prepared as one should is not where most public speakers want to find themselves. but we each have our own styles, and a procrastinator, I have read, is a form of mental unwellness coming through. It's not that you're lazy. It's not that you don't want to accomplish things, but there's all these different modes of how procrastination manifests itself, and the kind of procrastinator that you are tells you about your personality and all this kind of stuff. So, I'm buying some of it. Some of it I'm going, not for me. But self-exploration and understanding why I'm so challenged to give myself a break when I need to, I don't think is an uncommon problem. I think a lot of us do that. And that's why I wanted to talk about this idea a little bit. I don't want to lecture all night either, but I haven't given you much to go off yet, because you're going, okay, what's coming next, right? What's coming next?
I was going to tell you congratulations on reading the procrastination book. I've got the same book. It's been 3 years. I haven't got started yet.
Well, I have other books that suffer the same fate. There's one I'm trying to reread from 2 years ago that is sitting on my nightstand, and then I have 2 others that I've yet to crack the cover on that are sitting on my nightstand. And I'm thinking, I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow is the best day to start anything, by the way, right? Or next week, or after it rains. I'll mow the grass after it rains. So I say to oneself, I made a mistake, instead of thinking that I am a mistake. In terms of beating ourselves up and showing a little self-compassion, don't categorize your behavior as much as acknowledging that what you did maybe wasn't the best choice. But don't make that choice a nature of your character, which, if you're using labels like procrastination, that's probably what you're doing. But you need to learn to say to yourself, I've made a mistake, instead of thinking I am a mistake. It's a healthier option to self-esteem, because it's not a matter of trying to judge yourself. It's just about, moving forward, being positive of, yes, I've made some poor choices. Yes, I do want to change my life. Yes, it's going to be harder to break habits than not. Yes, you're going to slip back into some of those habits. Some of those habits may be sin, and yes, you're going to slip back into some of those habits too. But there's God's forgiveness and there's God's patience. And the things I would never say to any of you, if you're experiencing some of the same things that I experience, I would never say, get off your lazy rear and just do it. And that's the kind of language I use internally in myself. Just, would you stop it? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you clear your head? Why don't you think better than this? You can do better. Instead of using positive patience, from a mindset of using negative reinforcement rather than positive reinforcement, it's just not very effective. It's been studied and shown repeatedly by many researchers and human engineers that positive reinforcement and encouragement and positive thinking has positive results, and negative thinking and berating and ruminating over things that are in the past, all are linked to more negative outcomes. As I think about some of the things on my journey and the rumination, when you grab onto something, oh, this happened, and you hold on to it, and you go back to it, and you visit it, and what if I'd done that differently, and what if the outcome had been different, and what if? And you can really spin yourself into an unproductive cycle of just revisiting your mistakes of the past and making them your present by conjuring them up and going through the motions of just working it on in your head repeatedly, like you're going to come to a different outcome. It's in the past. Ethan. Addie.
This sounds very familiar to something that I have done myself in therapy called reframing. And it was something I learned to reframe your negative thoughts that you have about yourself into positive ones, and basically telling your mind and allowing your mind to think those positive things that we would or how I would respond, for example, to a friend. I wouldn't respond the way that I respond to myself to them. So a lot of the ways that you can reframe or asking yourself certain questions, for example, what would you tell a friend in this situation? Basically, what are you going to tell yourself as if you were telling a friend? Or if the worst happened, or what would be the worst thing that could happen? Or stating the facts, just state it plainly what happened instead of the feelings that come up. But that was really helpful to me because you kind of, it really makes you think about all of those negative beliefs that you kind of lie to yourself about that are not true, and showing that self-love and self-compassion that we would show to other people. And it's hard to do that for ourselves sometimes.
Well, a few moments ago while you were talking about that self-talk, I got elbowed really hard. Thought, well, I should probably say something. But just basically saying the same thing that you guys are, I guess a different way. I'm not going to say what I have and what I do. When I have thoughts like that, is I try to think about how does God see me? Because I don't see myself very clearly. And I mean, that's part of the problem as to why I was separated from God in the first place. But how does God see me, and how would Christ speak to me in this situation? Does he drop the hammer every time I mess up? Is he just waiting there to get me? You know, is he telling me how worthless I am? And when we're talking about reframing, when I reframe it like that, I can see, you know, the value that I have in his image and in reconciliation that he carried out for me. And I can sort of place those mistakes and those faults within perspective. And so trying to see myself how God sees me has been huge.
God so loved his creation that he made foreplan for our redemption. And each one of us has had a insurmountable price paid for our existence, for our soul. We all carry the debt of the one who was in debtor's prison for an amount that was far, far beyond what he could ever repay in his lifetime, were he to amount massive wealth. It wouldn't be enough. And if we are that valuable to God, then we wouldn't treat our friends like that. We wouldn't treat our brother in Christ like that. Why do we treat ourselves like that? So I think it's important, as you said, to reframe it that way.
And take another thing onto that. I've also found when, you know, I try to view myself and speak to myself as God would, and I'm still resisting that, well, God doesn't really understand, or, you know, that's a pride problem. And that's really what it is me not wanting to accept what God says. And just throwing that out there, that sometimes, you know, we have that kind of resistance, and I think that's really what it is. It's a weird way for it to manifest, but I do think it's pride.
Yeah, I would say sometimes it can be prideful to be a martyr, or it can be a form of pride to deny yourself things that there's no particular reason to deny yourself, but it's in a form of martyrdom. Is look how I suffer, and we equate suffering with religiosity sometimes, or at least the world does. I mean, there were those who were self-flagellants. They beat themselves with whatever objects, inflict pain, and say, well, that's how I'm going to reach God, is through my physical suffering. And there's plenty of physical suffering that goes around without harming yourself. But it's a false pride, I agree. Yeah.
Something that's just come to me recently is thinking about before I was conceived, all the options that, sorry, I'm going to choke now. Nope, you have to go on. I can't say it. Sorry. Okay, I got it. It's that all the different options he had of constructing joy, he had more than I can imagine, and he chose each feature to create me as I am, that is not like anybody else, and there's nobody else on earth that's like anybody else, and there's still more to come. So the thought that went into it, the care that went into that, the intention that went into that, I am starting to recognize.
So that's part of the acceptance of ourselves. There's a whole growth model based upon accepting the things that you cannot change and recognizing the things you can and knowing the difference between the two, and working on those things you can work on, and just accepting the things that are outside of your ability to change. And some of us are hardwired in ways that I don't understand. Some of us have characteristics and traits in our lives that were set up back when we were babies. And some of those are positive and some of them are not. Some of them we can work on, some can't. Yes.
What I also meant to say was that him, in doing that, he did it with God's care, with his love, and with his intention for me. He's not a God that is just randomly, whatever happens. He picks and chooses different things to make each of us unique.
Yeah. I mean, there's no thought here that we're going to reach a perfect state of being and a perfect state of mind where, we understand ourselves to that perfect degree, and that makes us perfectly, submissive to God's will and perfectly, never tempted to have self-pity or never tempted to feel unusually hard on yourself, or depression over the state of being, or all these things. I don't believe that's even part of the goal of life. Life is itself is again that testing of our souls, that testing of our spirits, for God to make determinations. This person one that's going to be receiving the grace and to be in my fold or not, and that's life.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
You can try.
Because when Joy's talking, she's talking about God putting all the pieces together. Or is it just biology that cells are naturally given to break apart and come together and naturally create? Because I don't know, would God sit there and go, well, Samantha's blind, Liz didn't have her right hand, Eli's severely autistic. Would he pick those for an individual if it was him putting together every piece of the puzzle? Or in genetics, did he create reproduction and nature takes its course and creates all the different variables?
He's sovereign and he has permissive will, and I think that's permissive will, that he has permitted that to happen. Because he's absolutely, totally sovereign, so.
Joy, you answer that question?
Yes, so I do think it was God before biology. God created biology.
Well, I
Let me
100% agree
finish.
with that.
So, what I was also going to say is that, okay, I don't know how many of you know about my brother, who was born blind, crippled, retarded, and he had cerebral palsy. that and you think, wow, how could God create such a thing? However, I will tell you, to this day, he has an impact on my life. You can ask my mom, you can ask Stan, any of us. He had an impact, a positive impact on our lives. I mean, there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think of him. And if anybody wants to see a picture of him, he is right here. I keep him with me all the time because he was so innocent and so pure, and still a product of something that God put together. And so the next thing that I was going to say is that when we were embryos, before we had any outside influences, before we had any choices, before we had any sin, that's what God created. And then he allowed it, like Jeff said, permissive. Then he allowed it to be what it was going to be. I don't think that God was mad at my brother. I don't think he was mad at us. I don't think he was punishing any of us. But he was the purest thing. He would react to voices with the most pure, huge grin and moan, and it was a delight to us. So even though things can happen that are awful, good can come out of that. I mean, I am now almost 67, and that's the influence has been on me every day.
And I think that's what God's, and I think that's what Paul's talking about in the book of Romans, when he says all things work together for good for those that love the Lord. Because you take that exact scenario, and that exact scenario has destroyed families,
Yeah.
destroyed people. You take, as sad as, child death is, I have seen it tear apart, good solid families. And I've seen families that have rallied around that. And it all comes back to when you love the Lord, it doesn't matter what happens. Good can come out of that. Good can come out of that of your brother. Good can come out of anything for people that truly, truly, truly devote themselves to God.
The same instance or similar circumstance can happen, as you said, in two different families. And one could be very, at least in their mind, very committed to the Lord and that trauma, then they totally deny God and leave. And you have families that have no faith in the Lord, that struggle with that trauma and struggle with that loss, and they are drawn then looking for spiritual healing, and they come to the Lord. So why does that happen? That's again because of personal choice. Each one of us is made up of such a combination of how we were raised, our genetic predisposition, the character traits our parents taught us, the environment we lived in, the country we grew up in, the culture we experienced, the kind of training and learning we were able to enjoy when we were younger people, the people that influenced our lives outside of our families, the mentors that we picked up along the way. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I don't think that God necessarily sits down and says, well, now, this brand new baby, that's a mass murderer, and that's the path they're going to take. Even when you look at the lives as people will do of mass murderers, there's not always a clear pathway as to what happened in their thinking to lead them to that choice. Sometimes there are, again, environmental issues that seem to influence that kind of loss of control. But in terms of how we deal with ourselves, being honest with our emotions is a big part of self-compassion. We have to allow ourselves to recognize that our emotions are real and that they are meaningful, and that even if we are driven to emotional expression or feelings because of poor thinking or because of structural problems with how we're engaging with the world, the feeling itself is just as real, whether the motivation for the feeling is artificial or whether it's in response, a more regulated response to the environment we're in. Either way, the emotions are the same.
Watching
Other thoughts?
Kind of what hearing and what it makes me think of is that the image that we bear, God's image, is not wrapped up in our flesh. Saying that we're made in the image of God doesn't mean God has two arms and two legs and I heard a joke. Someone was talking about biology recently. They said, if God knew what He was doing, He wouldn't have created the same tube that we eat from to be the one that we also breathe through, because then we wouldn't choke all the time when we're trying to eat our food. And it was just saying, and the joke was kind of, well, if that's God's image, maybe He's got that problem too. But it's I've always held that it's not our flesh that bears that image, that the physical appearance or the makeup of what we are in just this life, in the physical realm, is not it. And so that way you can say the thing that is made and implanted in us, the intangible soul, is both that which makes us pure, and it's also that which makes us inherently of value. We're as well designed as the birds and the flowers and all the other things, and God says you're of much more value than they are. You are much more value than they are, even though He designed them just as well as He designed us. So, you look at that and realize that it's not wrapped up just in the happenstance of nature that yields the differences in our physical bodies.
My niece, Gina's middle daughter, was in town Monday, and she came to visit Grandma Walker, and she saw Wildwood Lane. She played cards there many years growing up in that house, and she didn't recognize the place. Her and her husband have adopted a child born 3 months premature. He's got reflux. He's having obviously some physical challenges because of being born so early. He weighed 10 pounds and an ounce. And I picked him up and I said, there's nobody here. He's so light. We had children born heavier than this. She said, yeah, he can finally wear newborn stuff. He's 7 months old and he's wearing newborns. He was I think it was 1 pound 6 ounces when he was born. So he was 3 months premature. Spent several months in a prenatal hospital in Arizona. And he's got these big owl eyes, and his head is on a swivel because he's watching everything. And, why is he who he is? What challenges will he continue to face the rest of his life? He's probably not going to be very big. He's probably going to be a short little kid or a short little adult. His growth is behind the chart. It's a challenge to make sure he gets enough calories every day to keep him down, because he can only feed so well. It's just he's growing, but it's like lots and lots of little meals to get there. But he smiles with the purest of smiles, and he's happy, and he fell asleep just like that. She put him in the car seat, and he was gone before she had the car seat buckled in the car. And spending time with that little child and the love and devotion of the parents, I have no doubt that what God's going to make everything work out just fine. But that child could have struggles too. He can continue to have fights his whole life because of time and circumstance, as he was born so early. But that's nothing that should ever be to hold this child back. It's nothing that should ever ground them in I'm worthless or I'm worth less because of how I was born, because of how I came into the world. Avoid the pity parties. It is our suffering, that's what makes us human, and it's part of what connects us to other people, rather than thinking we're some sort of unique individual or isolated, even though we have our own experiences and they're different. But we have a commonality in suffering. And it's poor practice, it's poor thinking to think I'm the only one that suffers this way. but instead of, pity parties, a self-compassion is not a pity party. Again, 1 Corinthians 12:26, another idea about the commonality or the sharing of the human experience that we all are engaged in. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. I know that's about unity, and I know that's about pulling us together. I guess you'd say there's some nature in which we all have feelings toward the suffering of the world, suffering in a place where a tragedy happens. There was a big airliner crash in India recently, and there were hundreds of lives lost, and we think that's a tragedy, and that's human suffering, and that's people's children and grandchildren were on that plane, and spouses, and etc. But when we suffer, we all suffer together. It's not so I can inflict pain on everyone. It's so that we can have a supportive network of those who know what life is like and know that life has its challenges and are able to come alongside us. And we can do that for ourselves as well. I mean, when we are resistant to making changes in our outlook on life, the most helpful, supportive friends and neighbors are going to really have a hard time breaking through. If that's the model we want to pursue, if that's the place we want to place ourselves, we've got to have a realization that, we're not alone in this. Research is this, I mentioned this again, supportive encouragement, constructive criticism, more effective motivators than negative feedback. Psalms 18:35 says, "You've given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great." The psalmist says that you've got your right hand supporting me. You shielded me. You covered me. You kept me from harm. And your gentleness has made me great. Not the way most people look at a warrior. What makes this such a great fighter? What makes this person such a perseverance? What gives them such resiliency? Gentleness? God's gentleness gave the psalmist resiliency and greatness. And that's something that we, again, can achieve for ourselves, is have a little gentleness before greatness. Don't be so hard on yourself. Be constructive with your observations and your criticism. Don't confuse self-compassion with self-indulgence. Self-indulgence takes what it wants at the expense of what others may need from me or from another source. Self-compassion is the forgiveness of oneself that reduces the burnout feeling regarding having negative feelings towards oneself, and you should focus instead on the value rather than what one thinks others expect from me. A lot of our self-loathing or self-criticism is because we think others view us in that light. We think others see us as some sort of failure or some sort of weakness. And so we don't want to be seen as being a failure or weakness, and that's what makes us hypercritical. But if we focus instead on the values of, if you want to accomplish something, then take baby steps and make incremental progress instead of trying to eat the elephant in one bite. If you want to change your attitudes, work on ways to reframe your thinking with gradual steps so that we can get to where we can be more positive with ourselves. 1 Corinthians 4:14 says, "I'm not aware of anything against myself, and I'm not thereby acquitted. It is the Lord who judges me." Let's not hold ourselves to the standards of what we think others expect of us. For one thing, you may be wrong. You may conclude that others hold you in a very negative light, when in fact, they may hold you in a very positive light. Look how that person is accomplishing what they're able to do in light of what life has dealt them. Look at where they are today compared to they were last year because of what life has dealt them. Look at how they're able to bounce back and able to make progress, even if slow, even if baby steps. We may even have a false notion about how other people look upon us. and then to criticize ourselves based upon that false image. There's no reason to be that concerned about how other people look at you in your life. And I've said this before in this classroom. Friends want to help. They want to support, and they want to tell you what they think you want to hear. Be careful when seeking advice on these inner feelings. Let your inner feelings be your feelings, and let them be real to you. Share with others and get feedback, but be careful that folks who want you to feel better about yourself will agree with you when maybe a more critical eye would be more helpful. It's a challenge. So just be aware that sometimes we have good intentions, but our advice doesn't necessarily provide the answers that people are looking for. And that's okay too, because I can't expect other people to know me like I know me. And that's my justification for being so self-critical sometimes as well. I know all the problems. I know what's under every rock, and you don't. And that's why I'm as critical as I am sometimes.
Hey, Dad.
Yes.
I was thinking about that definition of self-indulgence, and I wasn't sure I really agreed with it, but the way I think of self-indulgence is like leaning in. It's things are already this bad. I'm just going to lean into it. I'm just going to pitch over the edge and just go all in. And it's sort of like the idea, to me, it's like the idea of just taking off all the barriers. You know, if it's already this bad, I've already messed up this much. I'm just gonna be all in.
Yeah.
And that to me is very similar to the idea of worldly grief versus godly grief that's talked about in 2 Corinthians, because the godly grief leads to repentance. There's actually an applying of the brakes. You stop and you change direction in an act of repentance. But the worldly grief leads to death because it just accelerates, and you take off the brakes and you take off the restrictions, and you just keep indulging, you keep participating deeper and deeper into it.
Excuse me. Like a gambler who continues to pile up gambling debts. I think someone said the other day, shopping makes me feel good. Well, if you're, again, getting that credit card bill in the mail every month and then you go out shopping to make you feel better about yourself, you're self-indulgent. You're going all in, like Andrew said. And it can take that form as well. Say kind things to yourself every day, just like you would to a good friend. Take a compassion break. RAIN was the acronym for a compassion break. Recognize the emotions, accept them, don't bury them, investigate your body's response to those emotions, and nurture, apply forgiveness or patience or whatever it needs. Some say there was a study, if you had college kids put their hand on their heart and say positive things about themselves 20 seconds a day, that they were able to break bad habits and were able to have better self-image, healthy, positive self-image than those that didn't take 20 seconds a day to give themselves a hug or just kind of a pat on the stomach or whatever it takes. Haven't tried that one yet, but I just ran across that one. Have positive messages like it's okay to have these feelings, or you're doing just the best you can right now, and then pay it forward. If we sow sparingly, we're going to reap sparingly. Give compassion as you have received it. Pay it forward as well. We're going to call that the class. I appreciate, again, all the contribution that has been made to this conversation. And I think much more than any preparation I've had, it's been the conversation that's been the valuable part of this time together. So my thanks to you for all those who have contributed in that way.